Well, everyone, and welcome to another episode. So I didn't actually tell you, Mark, I've named our episode. We're going to call it Beyond the Smile with Dr. Mark. What do you think of that? Because I think it's more than just the smile that you work on. So we're going to call it, that's our working title right
You're
now.
workshopping.
Yeah, workshopping. So
Yeah. No,
our millions of fans will tell us if they like it or not.
it'll be a typo.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an even number.
So welcome to another episode with Dr. Mark, and we have a special guest today, Savanna Jones. You're wondering why is Savanna here? So Savanna has gone through the journey with Dr. Mark, and we're going to explore that a little bit. But
She's not dead yet.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I didn't ask you last time, and I'm so curious, is like, what got you into dentistry? Actually, before we jump into this, I'm actually curious. Like, I always wonder why people make decisions in career paths. And we're just talking about with Savannah, like interrogating her. What are you going to do with your life? So, but how did you?
So it is part of an intervention.
How did where was that decision where like I'm going to get into dentistry?
Yeah, no, I didn't grow up like dreaming of
being a dentist.
Some people did actually.
Yeah,
some people in my class did, but no, I actually wanted to go into business when I was younger, but I grew up in sort of a humble background, and we had no connections basically. And back then, I basically thought business was about who you knew, what you knew, and so I panicked actually. And about halfway through grade 11, I said to my dad, well, I don't think I can do business because we don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And he said, well, my mom always wished there was a dentist in the family, which I thought was really funny. My dad didn't actually even graduate high school, but he was working with his hands, he was doing flooring, and I was doing that with him. So I enjoyed working with my hands and seeing a result in a product. And so I went and hung out with my dentist, and turns out he was running a business. I thought, well, maybe I could do both. And long story short, that's the path I chose, and it's worked out perfect.
Interesting. Is there, and I know this isn't this podcast, this live stream isn't about this, but I'm curious, like, is there, there's always like outsiders saying that you become a dentist or a doctor, but they don't teach you how to business. Like that's one area. Do you feel like
100%?
Yeah. Okay.
That was but I was fortunate actually. I think in that respect as well. It's just some of the choices that I made. I worked in some different settings and practices, and if you had your eyes open and your mind open, there was always something to learn, even if it was, hey, I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right way to run it.
Right.
And some of the people that I worked with early in my journey were actually quite forward thinking, and so that was super helpful. But it is kind of on the fly, on the job training.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah. So Savanna, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited. Yes.
So I'm curious, Savannah, actually, from you've been with Dr. Mark we were trying to figure that out, how long you've been with Dr. Mark, in 4 or 5 years, whatever it is that you started sort of when you first visited. I'm curious, like, were you nervous? Because I'm sure you're not super excited to go see the dentist, and you're like, do you have anxiety and nervous and going, do you recall being like scared of like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen when I go sit in the chair with the dentist?
Yes, I would definitely say I have a lot of anxiety like going to the dentist and the doctor.
Well, they're mean.
Feel like
they're mean.
I feel like
you go to the wrong dentist.
No, I feel like there's kind of a stigma around like dentistry and dentists. So I was kind of nervous to go in there, but
did it get easier after like you visit the first time and then the second time? You get more comfortable with the experience?
Definitely. Like building a relationship, like you guys got to know me. It was good. It was nice.
Interesting.
And I definitely got less nervous to go.
So I assume, Dr. Mark, on that, like I would assume anxiety is a common issue, I guess, maybe, or some issue when it comes in. So how do you deal with that when someone comes in? And it could have been like, I don't know, like sample size of raw, but my experience when I was a kid going to dentist was not good. Like my dentist was like butcher. Like honestly, it hurt every time I went to the dentist. I cried every time because it wasn't like, even just for cleaning, it wasn't a good experience. And I know things have come a long way, but how do you deal with people that have that anxiety or stigma that is, on that side of it?
I think twofold. Number one, things have come along.
Yeah.
But I also think that, Savannah hit the nail on the head. If the objective is actually to form a relationship.
Right.
In order to do that, not only does Savannah want me to know her, but She wants to know
Vice
me.
versa. Right.
And I think historically our profession has probably been not that great at sharing what's going on. Hey, what is this about? Why is it important to me? Right. And I think the more that you pull back the curtain and expose the Wizard of Oz and all that kind of stuff, then, the less terrifying it is. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, when we talk to patients, we try not to use like super heavy science jargon. It's just plain language.
Yes.
What is it about? Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Right.
And if you had, like, when Savanna came to first visit you, 13, 14 years old, whatever it was at the time, as a 13, 12, 13, 14-year-old, you're still growing,
Yeah.
right? So I'm curious, like, how your approach is different when you're working with someone that's a little bit younger, that yeah, there's going to be a bunch of changes in her life as she's growing, or his life, as the jaw's going to change. Like, I assume things are going to grow. So is it a different approach than an old guy like Rob comes in?
Yeah. So, I mean, this gets into the concept of sort of epigenetics, right? So it wouldn't matter what environment I grew up in. My eye color is my eye color.
Right.
But depending on some of the environmental things that I would be subject to in terms of, let's say even things like breathing quality or allergens, etc., will change the way that I grow and develop, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the population as a whole, you can take slightly older Rob, right? And say, okay, let's play CSI and work backward and try to figure out how come you are the way that you are. Not if there's anything wrong.
Yeah, like, wait a minute.
It's not judgment, this is observation.
I'm walking off this show.
And then that's okay, we got it. But if you're looking at somebody in their youth, right, you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, is growth and development happening, quote unquote, normally or ideally? And if it's not, then first of all, can you determine why it's not? Address that, not just the symptom, right? So crooked teeth are basically a symptom of something.
Right.
For example, but if you can get to the why and get to that deep level, then I think you can hopefully avoid the harder challenge, which is the fully grown adult, and how do you change that person?
Interesting. And do you remember, can you recall back working with Savanna years ago, when sort of what your approach was, like what you kind of like, what you sort of saw and what your approach would have been? Because
yeah, well, I feel that maybe in some respects Savanna was not quote unquote typical or normal.
Okay.
And I legitimately mean this.
Right.
Savannah's always had a maturity about her, so it's much easier when somebody truly understands it's a partnership. Because I have a measure of control, but it's not the be all.
When they leave the chair.
Exactly. Right? So they have a responsibility during treatment and self-care, etc. as well. And so everybody's different, right? You've got to sort of figure that out.
So it's insane. Savannah, I'm curious, like I said, when I went to school 80 years ago, wearing braces, you were like, you were embarrassed. Like you didn't want to show up to school with braces, like way back when. Like you were the quote unquote loser in the school if you wore braces. But I feel like that stigma's gone. Like kids are excited to have braces on, and you change the color every time you go in. Like, do you feel like it's not a bad thing anymore when you showed up at school with braces on? Were you worried?
Yeah, no, I wasn't worried too, maybe a little bit in the beginning.
Right.
But I was really excited like to switch the colors. I remember like searching up YouTube videos and I have to like prepare myself. I don't know. I don't think
That's interesting.
I think it's something changed.
Did you actually research stuff like that before you?
I did. Yeah.
So that's different even in your environment now, because they're coming a little bit more quote unquote educated as well. Maybe.
Well, back when I first graduated, I mean, the internet was barely a thing. Right?
Interesting.
So you wouldn't have access to that kind of information.
Right.
That's part of the upside of today's world, right? You have a lot of things at your fingertips. You can do some of your own reflection analysis, etc.
Right.
Not that all of it's accurate.
No.
But at least it's like starting a conversation, right?
Right. Interesting. It's about how would you feel like from the days, and it's still like Dr. Mark said, your journey still continues, but that experience, and I know I'm talking a little bit more ortho when it comes to braces and stuff, but there was a whole bunch of other stuff that was done to kind of correct. But did you feel the experience was good? Do you look back and go, oh my gosh, that was like terrible time in my life? Really? But
I can step out if you want to speak on it.
No, I thought it was good. It was definitely a long period of my life. So it was a lot of patience, but it was It was good.
Percentage-wise for somebody so young.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, actually, that was one of the questions I think, and I don't remember how long did you have your, and I know I'm just picking on braces, but how long did you have your actual braces on for? 3 years. So I'm curious. That was the question, like, because I remember when I was, again, from an outsider, you're here like, you get braces, you have them on for like 2 years, you take them off and move on. They're like, so why would a patient, not to pick on someone like Savanna, would have had them longer than, and is it different? Do some people have them less than 2 years, or like, does it vary amongst everybody?
Yeah. And so it goes back to a little bit about like what we were talking about last time.
Right.
So
Okay.
first things first, you have to identify what the problem is that you're
Right.
trying to address,
Right.
and that will drive your solution. But a lot of times, if things aren't going, I shouldn't say well, but not going as ideally as
Yeah,
they possibly can, again, it's not just about moving teeth. I'm a big
Right.
proponent, and I probably said it to you at some point in time, right? Straight shoulders are just straight shoulders. Doesn't mean that they're standing in the right location. So if you're thinking about where should the bones be,
Right.
can we affect that level of change, and underlying structures like joints and airways and all of that. If you're questing after that, that stuff takes a little bit longer for sure.
Hmm. So what's the journey after braces come off? So what does it look like for someone like, again, I want to focus more on sort of a, Savannah's now 18 and going on, like, so what's that journey look like? Is it just regular maintenance? Like, what does that look like for, someone that's a younger person?
Yeah, hopefully. But I mean, bodies are a funny thing, right? Like
Right.
science wants us to live to be 120. I'm not sure our body parts want us to be 120. Right? So things do break down over time.
Right.
So oftentimes we'll use the analogy of a car, right? I don't care how much you pay for your car and how great your brakes are. If you step on them enough times, you're going to need some servicing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the same thing goes with teeth. If we see a pattern that's maybe disproportionate or it's elevated from what it
Right.
should be, then we sit down and put our thinking cap on and say, okay, what's happening, right? Why is this presenting? Right. Why is that going in? And then whatever it is that crops up, that becomes the new focus. And yes, obviously regular maintenance is important, not only from a preventative standpoint, but also from an analysis standpoint. So if you can catch problems or challenges early, right, then oftentimes your solution is a little bit easier, simpler, quicker, less expensive,
Right.
all of those things, right?
If you don't, if you need if your teeth aren't straight and you need braces and you haven't fixed the underlying issue, braces come off. 10 years later, do teeth get crooked again? If you hadn't fixed the issue?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
And so one of the classic examples is some people will end up being told, your teeth are too big for the size of your jaws.
Mm-hmm.
I never think that that's correct. I think your jaw is too small for the size.
Yeah.
And it's mostly a growth problem. So you can even see some of those patients where they will have had teeth taken out. They create too much space.
Right.
You do the ortho. You haven't corrected maybe the airway issue or the tongue posture issue.
Right.
And lo and behold, that person comes back 10 years later and they've got crowding, even though you've already removed teeth. Right? So were the giant teeth the problem?
Right. No.
There's something that's not supporting the structure of the jaws.
Right. Interesting. And you said you're losing some wisdom shortly. You're going to use your wisdom teeth.
It's important to have that excuse.
Are you worried about that?
I am worried.
Yeah.
And my wisdom, that's what's stored.
I thought you were more worried about whether or not you're going to be videoed after the
Yeah.
investigation.
That's very vulnerable space to be in. I'm scared.
Savanna, when you went through this, and I was looking at pictures last night, and the change of like your jawline and everything, like, do you feel like you did have more like confidence when you, from the start to finish? Like, do you feel like you've noticed, I mean, you must have noticed the change.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. And do you feel like you have more confidence when you're doing your like influencer TikTok video?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a two-way to get an autograph.
Yeah. No, I definitely like a lot more confidence. Even like when I was looking at the photos,
Right.
I was like, wow, I don't know. I was looking a little crazy before. I don't know. So, yes.
And I'm thrilled with the result. I think it's beautiful.
Well, and I think that's one, it must be the passion or the joy you get out of what you do right? I think that this is part of it. I would assume when you kind of sit back and you can, when you work with someone and you see the difference that's been made, and not only, like I said, just like I would assume it does, like you feel better, you look like you're more confident, right? So you want to smile, you want to like so you must get joy out of just seeing the results that come out of
Yeah,
something
it's
like that, right?
fantastic. I mean, ortho, and I know we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I mean, it's a funny journey, right? Like everybody's really excited in the beginning,
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
really excited at the end. It's that middle slog where you got to remember this kind of stuff because it helps, push through to the finish line, right?
Right.
The middle is the dark days, right? Where you're like, nah, I think I might be done now.
Yeah, I just want these off.
Yeah, but we're like, yeah, not quite.
I remember like every appointment. I think I'm gonna get them off this time.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking, no.
Well, and it's a funny thing too, right? Because when you start going through this, there is a boatload of change that happens
Right.
right in the beginning. But a lot of the stuff is, again, bone development, root
Right.
placement, all that kind of stuff. And it just takes time. And you're like, they're strict.
Mhm.
What is the issue?
Yeah, interesting.
I'm going to take them off myself.
You mentioned before about how technology's changed. Can you speak a little about that? I'm curious on, like, again, back to when I was going to a dentist when I was a kid, to take, like, what are the big advancements you've seen? Like, I'm sure there's little ones that happen all the time, but is there any like big ones that really stand out from even when you started practicing to like today?
Yeah, well, I mean, even going through dental school and I understand they're challenged. I mean, they're charged with teaching the tried and true, right? But as we know, the world in basically every arena is just moving at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, materials are advancing, techniques are advancing, equipment's advancing, and dental schools cannot keep pace with that, right? So a lot of that stuff, the joke that I was at least put forward to me was, great, your degree now gives you the license to learn.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there's a reason why it's called practicing, right?
Right.
You shouldn't feel ever, in my opinion, as though you've arrived, right? There's always something that you could do better. You need to have this little healthy smidge of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Could have done it faster, better.
Right, for sure.
More painless. So, I mean, lasers are going gangbusters. Lasers that will remove stuff, lasers that treat soft tissue issues, lasers that create biomodulation, help enhance healing. The digital revolution is crazy. So, the goopy impressions that I think many of us have experienced at some point in time are almost a thing of the past. Most of the time, you can do that with a camera now, and the reality is it's a more accurate outcome,
right?
And that's really what should be driving technological advance. Anyways, it's just better outcomes, better experiences, right?
I have a question. Do you know what biomodulation is? Because I don't.
Absolutely not. That's a long word, and I don't know.
Well, and that one, no. Biomodulation just basically means that you can stimulate tissues. So, for example, if you look at it on a cellular level, maybe cells are not that healthy, right? So they're not using energy or producing energy as effectively as they could. And there's suffrage, right? And if you get enough cells that are doing that, maybe that's pain, maybe that's fatigue, maybe that's spasm, some sort of dysfunction. So you can actually deliver specific wavelengths of energy to those tissues and help upregulate back toward normal and health.
Yeah.
Flushing biotoxins.
Interesting.
And such.
We got so educated this morning.
Yes.
This is great. I'm curious, Dr. Marcus, the last question I had is around what's sort of the post-care that you would want, or post-treatment care that you would like, and I'm talking more from a younger, like someone like Savanna, that like, what do you encourage a 16, 17-year-old that doesn't maybe think about, you know what I mean? Like, so what are some things that that maybe some tips or some post-treatment stuff or some home care that they can even just think about, little things that could help them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the basics would be quite simply, I would, use a good electric toothbrush.
Right.
With good technique. Right. So I always joke with it.
We're going to get Savanna to demonstrate how she no kids.
Well, the easiest one is, and we've all, or I should say all, but many of us have heard somebody going,
Yeah.
That's categorically
That's not good.
You want to hear monotone, which means you're moving it slowly enough for the brush to actually work. Floss is still a great thing. Stuff gets trapped in spaces that needs to be broken loose, but a water pick A water flosser makes it unbelievable.
Dr. Mark yells at me every time I go in there that I need water.
You do.
Yeah.
It's changing.
It's a slight elevation. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's 7, but I yell. But yeah, those are simple things. And then you know, you're about to head through some years where quite often we lose people, right?
Right.
Because there's so many things going on. You're changing cities sometimes. You're going through
Right,
education. Your world is like
Yeah.
it's different.
Yeah.
So if you can just remember,
You can neglect that part. You said the water pick was life changing. Do you
Yeah.
for real?
It
In
actually,
what way?
no, it actually was.
In what way?
Well, it's very efficient.
Hmm.
It actually is life changing, truly.
Interesting. There's a good case study right there. So, and I know we talked about this last question I ended is like the personal satisfaction you get from like working with patients, like of all ages, but like
you're not trying to make me cry.
yeah, we're gonna hug it out. So,
yeah, no. You know, as I've evolved in my learning and understanding, what I'm really trying to do is as early as possible try
Right.
to normalize people and try to head off, you know, bad outcomes, you know, negative experiences as soon as possible, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have lots of little kiddos that come into the practice, and most of it in those stages is about educating the parent
right.
and just having some fun, so that maybe if we have to do something at some point in time, it's not so terrifying, right?
You guys heard that? Dr. Mark makes dentistry fun. Well, thank you. It was fun. It was fun. Thank you, Savanna, for coming in.
course.
So I think it's been cool to kind of see the other side of it as well. So it's really neat to kind of talk about.
From a personal standpoint, though, it is crazy to watch them go from littles to.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, they grow up, especially when you have someone that comes at a young age and they stay. Like you said, eventually they might move on and
Yeah.
move cities. But if they stay with you, like they become part of your family almost. Like because you see them like fairly often, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes more than family. So,
There you go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, thank you, Savanna, for coming in. Thanks to Dr. Mark again. So,
guys.
and we'll be live again in a couple of weeks. So, thanks for joining us.